Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing Call Me By Your Name, directed by Luca Guadagnino, and then newly released The Harder They Fall by James Samuel, The French Dispatch, directed by Wes Anderson, Last Night in Soho by Edgar Wright, and finally, Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
It's going all right, man. How was your week in movies?
Doing it's a doozy of a week, as you might have heard, folks at home. There's a lot of new releases we have here.
We really do, yeah.
Big time. I mean, these are probably the biggest blockbusters we've had since the start of the podcast.
Yeah, these are some big boys.
Yeah,
these are definitely some big boys.
Yeah, I was able to get in a little bit of a kind of a research project with Call Me By Your Name as well, which wanted to see more of Timothée Chalamet's acting before jumping into Dune. So happy to tie that in there, even with so many new releases.
Yeah, and then even so, like Call Me By Your Name only came out in 2017.
Right.
Very fresh new list kind of we have for today.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, do you want to get started right away?
Sure.
All right, well, we'll start with that 2017 film, Call Me By Your Name.
Okay, so Call Me By Your Name, this is a pretty famous film. You may have heard about this creating some buzz for its Oscar nominations and wins in 2018. I believe the win was for screenplay. And this is the gay love story between Timothée Chalamet, Armie Hammer, in a very academic Italian setting. It's 1980s. It's very stylized for that reason. It's a little bit of a time capsule for that reason as well to jump into. Honestly, I don't want to compare it so early on in my description of it, but it really, I think, is associated in just the same way that Brokeback Mountain was the Oscar kind of gay film that was associated at the time or in that decade. This very much has kind of taken that similar crown. Not that there has to be one crown, but it feels like there's some oversimplification sometimes in media for that reason.
No, 100%. I don't think that this carried as long as Brokeback Mountain did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think there'll be throwbacks to it. Like, Brokeback Mountain is still, like, brought up once in a while.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Even if just, maybe, not the best jokes in the world.
Right,
it's still being brought up. I don't think this will be that, but I do think it carried that weight for at least a period of time.
Yeah,
And then, now, definitely it's in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. And for what it's worth, maybe that oversimplification, it kind of hurt this movie for me going into it because I hadn't seen it during that Oscar season. And I was expecting one thing and definitely got another. So,
well, that's another problem with things that hit kind of the SJW side. It's like, it's just practically speaking, it is going to get a little bit more praise. So you almost have to take it with a grain of salt when you're really just looking at it as a movie and not trying to look at it outside the culture, in the culture bounds of society and everything like that.
Absolutely,
we're in the theater
really hit the nail on
watching.
the head too.
Yeah,
because I think going into this, I was expecting one thing where. And I'll get into it, of course. I mean, this film kind of boils down to something very simple, honestly, which not saying that's bad, but
sure.
I don't know if it really is deserved of the immense amount of praise.
Exactly. Right. And I think it definitely was up for more than just one Oscar, I believe.
Yes, it only won the screenplay or adapted screenplay, I guess.
Right.
But yes, it was nominated for a slew of different things.
That's right. Yeah.
I think focusing on some highlights, folks, for this film, there's a focus around creativity. Our characters are in a kind of an academic sabbatical of some sort. They are studying in the Italian countryside. It's 1980 on the dot. There is wine. There is dance parties. There, it is in the summertime. There is a very particular style that this is going for, and I think probably one of the biggest highlights of this film is that creativity, that type of academic environment. It is such a perfect thematic match for the gay curiosity that the film is about.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Having the kind of great follow through that there are these themes of discovery of self, especially in Timothy's character, who is underage. There was some talk about that when this film came about, but there is a kind of a taboo-ness to it that is associated with it. I think it's probably the best thing about the film because it is such a perfect match of themes and following through with script, kind of a ludonarrative connection there that is really great. I think that's the biggest highlight of the film. When it comes to a bit about the feel of the film, I wanted to avoid using this terminology probably as long as possible. It might have come up in a previous episode. I don't know. You can check me on this. But Oscar bait.
I think we say that often.
I've been consciously trying to avoid maybe, failing at that. But.
Yeah, no. But I don't know why. That's an appropriate word.
Yeah.
There's because it's... a handful, maybe half a dozen films every year has that kind of tension. The way they're critically reviewed and the way they're being talked about in the press and media. Oscar bait is exactly what it is. You have the films trying to hit their marks in certain ways. And no, I think that works out.
Yeah, I think it's a good catch-all in the sense that this is a platform for Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet to act and act their pants off. I did, no pun intended with that. But when it comes to what we're looking at here, it's in its writing, and I do say that the writing, right in the nomination and the win for Best Adapted Screenplay, there's a lot to love there. It's certainly of a higher caliber, of a higher brow, but I can't shake the feeling that the film is very much just trying to sound smart in some ways.
It's coming off arrogant?
Maybe not arrogant, but the best way I could describe it is, and I really do say so humbly, I think I'm smart enough to know when a film is trying to sound smart.
Sure.
And I could not shake that for the entirety of the run of this film.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that just sense about them. It's just when they're watching something... I don't know. Sometimes it just feels like they're trying to push you in a certain corner of like believing something or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that completely makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it is, you are walking into it with a lot of press behind it and everything like that. Like, again, there is that thing of, they're talking it up. And when you're going into the movie, you're expecting something for sure.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's easy to be not thrown by those things, but you're catching on.
Yeah, and those expectations can be damning too. And I think I was expecting...
Big time.
One thing here, and actually, in the coming weeks, we'll touch on some more films in this way of expectations and just coming into an entirely different ball game of what this is. But mainly, I was watching this for an exploration of Tim's acting chops. I wanted to see... especially lining up for Dune, lining up for probably his position to be in a serious career pivot to seriously mainline films, and maybe even specializing in sci-fi, depending on Dune. I want to see...
Well, he's got the one big one coming out where he's the... it's set back in medieval times.
Oh, yeah, on Netflix, right?
I believe, yeah.
I think it's called The King or something
like that, yes. Yes.
I should add that to the list, actually.
I think so, for sure. Yeah.
But to be honest, I wasn't too big of a fan of his acting in Dune. We'll obviously get to that in just a moment.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And if very similarly here, he's a little bit of an oddball on screen to watch. I do like him better in this. I honestly, if I had to kind of boil it down, my thoughts, I clock him in like a Ryan Gosling, that he's good at kind of one. I don't want to say one note, but he's good at doing his one thing. And that happens to work with a lot of different films and a lot of different roles, but I don't per se see that as too nuanced otherwise than that. I mean, I really don't want to tear him apart. Clearly, he's on a meteoric rise, but that's overall where I would clock him. On the other hand, Armie Hammer, I think, is a slight to the film, not for anything outside of the film's reception, of course, but it's a little bit of an oddball cast just because he's positioned in such a way that he feels like a miscast in this film.
Oh, he's just not right for the part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not for the setting, not for the themes. His character is supposed to be antagonistic at the beginning to Timothy's character, but I don't know. It was a hard miscast for me because I just did not feel like he was bringing the right energy to it. Then again, though, I'm not the intended demographic for this, so maybe that chemistry was there for others, and clearly the reverence for this film might be evidence of that. Then, so when it comes to the romance itself, and this is really going to be honestly some of my final thoughts on things, because this is where it boils down to it. The romance itself, I think, is where I was scratching my head the most, because I certainly got what the film was going for. What surprised me and what I was referring to with some of my expectations is that this film is a lot more raunchier than I expected. And believe me, I'm not saying in like a prudish kind of way or anything like that. It more so shocked me because it was. If you look at this film from a bird's eye, it really just boils down to a very emotionally hot and heavy summer fling. And I don't feel as much as I really love the theming and the styling of how it pairs to the story it's trying to tell. I mean, it really is something great as far as the setting, telling a story in itself to these characters, and that being such a perfect fit for this story of discovery for these characters on both sides of the coin. It just, I mean, it really just boils down. I mean, you can really very, very quickly summarize this film, and that's where it left me with. I had these expectations that it was going to be somewhere greater. Maybe that pigeonholed my experience a little bit. I think probably the best thing I can say is go in not expecting an Oscar film and be pleasantly surprised at the care put into how this story is portrayed and how it evolves with the characters.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, this is. Not a movie where you're going to see kind of a playful meet cute, and then they kind of have a relationship from there. Emotions are very heavy here. It is, a film that is going to really tug at heartstrings for what these characters are put through eventually, and what they ultimately have to give up. I think the highbrow dressings, whether that's setting, whether that's script. It's certainly good. Like I said, I think it was maybe, to summarize what I was saying before, with kind of it's trying to sound smart. Maybe it's a little bit, try-hardy, Oscar bait, however you want to kind of summarize it there. But I think the highlight there, the matchings of academia, humanities into this discovery, it's a good highlight. And at the core, yes, does it boil down to a summer fling? Sure. But I think there is an intentional design to how this film was crafted, how the buildup happens, and a pretty solid time for that reason.
Oh, okay. All right.
But with that said, I'm not going to say much more because while, of course, spoilers with this, not the most difficult thing to dance around, I think it's something that for our audience at home, that this is going to be one particular persuasion, and if I could eliminate some of the expectations going into that, broaden that up a little bit, I think this comes out with a pretty solid recommendation. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give Call Me By Your Name a 68.
68, okay. Sounds about right.
And definitely, I think if you, on the other hand, where I, was studying this film a little bit for Timothy's acting chops, I think in addition to that, if you really like him as an actor, it was a phenomenal performance.
Yeah, it's funny. Just looking at 68 and listening to you talk about it, it's like, this is the appropriate score. Take the buzz away. Take the media attention to it for the political reasons.
97 on Rotten Tomatoes. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Ridiculous. Exactly. It really is.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this is a bad
97,
movie. You know what I mean?
That.
Very much above average and just on the verge of a good or great movie. You know what I mean? It's something certainly worth your time, an above-average watch.
When you're in the 60s, as we've been saying this, a decent amount. When you're in the 60s, that is a good movie. It is a good movie, but I think that manages I think that score alone, people can look at that and manage expectations.
Exactly. And hopefully that helps with the guide of this, because if anything kind of shot me in the foot was, again, these expectations.
And this is 4 years later.
Exactly.
I mean, the hype back then was unbelievable.
Right.
Okay, wow, 68. Very good, Ben. So, like we said, folks, that's our only previously released film. Our next 4 are all ones that are in theaters now playing. So we just want to take a second now, remind people, Vin and I host the show. You all help produce the shows. We don't look at you as listeners. We listen to you as producers. And if we're going off the value for value model. Basically what that says is, if we're providing value for you, if you're getting value from this on a weekly basis, you're checking out the site, if you could, throw us back some value. And basically what that means is monetary donation. You can go to thedailyratings.com at the donations tab, and you can donate a little bit, a big amount, reoccurring payments, just a one-time thing. You write a note, and when you donate with the note, we'll read it on the air. And this will be our established producer segment, and we'll just read down. And if you want to be anonymous, just say you want to be anonymous, and we'll say, hey, anonymous donated this much. We can read your note and kind of open discussion here. This is the part of the podcast that we can have, and we're having a good time doing this. We're in the early stages of it, and we're trying to build something great with you all. So that's it. That's a value for value model. Again, it's thedailyratings.com at the donations tab. We appreciate all you producers who help produce this and keep it going for us.
Absolutely.
It takes a little bit of money, but it sure takes a lot of time to put all this together. We hope you enjoy it. We are enjoying it ourselves. So we thank you all so much. Alrighty, so with that, let's go now into our in theaters now. And we're going to start with The Harder They Fall, directed by James Samuel.
Yes. So this is streaming on Netflix. Has been for some time. I actually had some personal friends reach out and want to get my opinion on this. So I said, hey, what a better opportunity to put it to audio. For
Absolutely.
The podcast. If I'm watching it anyway, you're going to hear about it, basically.
And let me just tie that back, producers. If you donate a total of $500, and not one, you could do $1 a day if you want. You could do $1 a month, and if we're doing it that long, that would be great. But if you hit that 500 mark, you producers, you can get the title of director. And with director, you will be known as a director such and such. You can make up a name, you can use your whatever name, but you will be known as Director John, Director Vin, Director Tom, if you want whatever you want to be. But part of that is, besides a little gift package you'll get, you also get to pick any film you want for Vin to review, and he will review it for the next podcast, or at least the one after that. So,
and go easy on me, folks. Come on. That could be truly nightmarish, but hey, I'll do it.
But anyway, just wanted to throw that in there, Vin.
Yeah.
But anyway, so friends got in touch with you.
Yeah. So, and I mean, this was an easy watch. Again, kind of. It's gonna come through on these kind of HBO Max, Netflix, any kind of digital release. That the barrier to entry is pretty low, so that doesn't play into my score rating at all. But it is a factor that I kind of want to note. This is Netflix's big blockbuster attempt of a Western, and very much from the get-go, you can see that this is trying to be a modern-day blaxploitation film. Blaxploitation, if you're not familiar with that terminology, think of movies like Shaft, Foxy Brown, or probably what a lot of people's gateway movie was into this was actually a parody of that, which was Black Dynamite.
Yeah.
And definitely trying to parody off of those hyper-stylized, almost, entirely full black cast. That is what this film is after. And though it may not be laid out in the description of it or in the Netflix summary, you quickly gather that very early on by the setting and by the extremely large cast that is filled with a who's who of modern black actors and even previous superstars as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think as far as the Western elements, it's, I mean, my note here is Golden Gun Goofy. It is closer to something like The Quick and the Dead, which is a little bit of a callback. We had a Western deep dive, Tom, and we watched The Quick and the Dead. We're a huge fan of it, but it definitely is more action movie with Western wrappings. I would almost compare this to a Sin City, and hear me out for a second, just in the sense that, I mean, it's not in black and white or hyper comic book stylized, but that same type of style intensity is right here, just in a Western kind of flavor persuasion.
Yeah.
It's important to note the tone, because I think a majority of the cast being black, there is a little bit of a genre of kind of historical fantasy. This film is not concerned, much like a Django Unchained, where there is a social commentary, there is an intensity to the message that they're trying to say, or pointing at atrocities or anything like that. This film is just wholly not concerned with that. There are some callbacks to slavery, to white ownership, but the film is focused on having a good time. It is not trying to put a spotlight on that, and more importantly, it's not trying to put a spotlight on that because with such a large black cast, it's not trying to explain how an entire town is made up of African American population.
Right.
In the Old West, you know, I mean, there needs to be kind of a separation there for the story they're trying to tell.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to, you know, my feelings on that, I'm not saying a stylized Western action film needs to walk the same path as Django, that slavery is interwoven into the story. This is a revenge tale. This is a gunslinging tale. So it's not a problem that it's doing it. It's certainly an empowerment story for that reason, but I think it's important to note because it was something that I was kind of asking questions the whole time, or even waiting for those plot threads to connect to our characters.
Okay.
As naturally it would with the time setting or the time period in the story. I think the best thing you can do watching this film, especially if you are in love with multiple of these cast members and you want to see them in a fun blockbuster film, take that out. Have fun with the kind of Western fantasy, and that's, again, where I'm tying back to see it like a Quick and the Dead, see it like a hyper-stylized Sin City. You're going to have a lot better of a time with this film then. So, does that make sense?
I do think it does. I do think it does make sense.
I think for that reason, if you like Westerns, you know...
Here's my question. I literally was just about to ask you that. You know how my feeling on Western. I'm a little bit more old school Western. Love John Wayne and things like that. Would you say this is a movie for me or like true Western fans? Is it? Or am I gonna watch this and treat it like the new Magnificent Seven that came out?
No. And if anything, your thoughts on Buster Scruggs as well. The goofiness there,
right?
Again, it is Golden Gun goofy. That is my elevator pitch.
Is it comedy, or they're throwing in there like, is there comedy in the movie, or is it like that goofiness is just for the audience and the players in the film aren't part of the goofiness? Does that make sense?
I think it's an attempt at badassery. It's trying to amp things up in a fictional way that obviously would not be in a real Western setting.
Of course. But there's movies that do it well.
And it's hit or miss for that reason. I think some things land, others don't. And you also have to understand, it's definitely going for a blockbuster. This is not like any sort of small Western project or anything like that.
For sure.
Big
It's Western.
set pieces.
I mean, it's Netflix's. Yeah, they're trying to put. They wanted the all-black cast. They wanted to do something like a Western, which you don't usually see heavy black characters, so they went for it. Even the trailer was super. Like, how was the stylized compared to a Tarantino? Like was the gore? Did they try to give you those wow moments, those wow scenes? Because Tarantino can set up a scene so beautifully and so well. I don't know if that was throughout or no.
Unfortunately, not. And I believe this is a first-time director as well, or maybe he doesn't have a feature-length thing.
Okay.
I don't want to knock him too much, but that expertise, that craftsmanship is just simply not there.
Of course, yeah.
But I do understand what you're saying. I think the best thing I would say is the style is put into making all sides of the characters, good and bad, as cool as possible. And what else do you want to achieve as a blockbuster, honestly?
Sure.
So.
But how did it pull it off?
Right. How it
very
pulled it off.
skeptical. I'm very skeptical.
I think that's it. It's just understanding what it is. And if you are down to have a fun action, kind of no strings attached type of time with this film, I think it is what it is. I think for me, falls short in a major way, and we'll get into some of that in just a second. Biggest strength is the cast.
Yeah,
Idris
big
Elba
cast.
is awesome in this.
Okay.
Plays a very cool character, plays the villain, and it's fun to see a lot of characters on the screen. Unfortunately, where this dips down for me is that there's nothing of substance for really any of these characters. I would say it is on par with like a Fast and Furious style character arcs, that there is the appearance of an arc, but it's really just very one note.
So it's more so literally about like getting the big name on the screen?
It's probably about getting as many big names on screen as possible and, telling an empowerment story, which, again, not terrible. I'm telling you folks at home, in the end product,
It's surface level.
it's surface level
not a
and
lot of depth.
Yeah, not a lot of depth. I think what's a big miss for me is the music, believe it or not. And this is what I want to say with some of your Tarantino comments. The music is distracting. And believe me, how I've introduced this is it's so stylized. It could honestly, I would almost say from a bird's eye, you could probably play any music you want. The music is such a miss for me. There is reggaeton, there is Cuban, there is rap, there is dance hall. It is distracting because the music is not only avoids any sort of thematic pairing, it is very much I want to kind of play my music or what I like throughout the entire film. And and on top of that as well, I think in addition with a very hard pitch to tie these type of genres to the setting. Again, I'm not trying to over compare it to Django because certainly, there's people can make more original stories. I like Django, but it's not the Holy Grail or anything like that. There's just such a mismatch sometimes with how music is introduced and how it plays on certain thematic cues. It is downright distracting.
Wow.
It is such a negative for me and constantly took me out of the film.
It would be for me too. It would be for me too.
Yeah. And there is rap in Django. So again, it's not that there's not a pairing going on there.
It's really not as easy as you would think.
Yeah.
There is an art to picking the proper music for a thing. Like, it's a big, important job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you gotta, I think the film has to sell it too. I feel like there certain times when they'll be riding into a town, for instance, and a song is playing. There's just... not only is it distracting, not only is it just loud, it just doesn't play into anything for the feelings of the characters.
Right.
Certainly, there is a common theme with Idris Elba's character. Again, a big highlight of the cast because he's a really cool villain, and he has this kind of reggae, chanting or theme behind him that matches in places that is almost nowhere else in this soundtrack.
Okay.
And in the pairing and in the musical editing. So, bottom line, I think baked into the movie, it is a big action western, and Netflix has definitely thrown money at this to try to have a blockbuster release among many heavy hitters right now. I think it is a very easy watch. For me, I was coming out of this lukewarm to cold. I'm saying very simply, it's nothing that you need to make time for. And for me, for a couple particular reasons, and I think folks at home, you're probably gathering how important soundtrack and sound editing is for me. There are some bad slights against this film that really actually sapped the little enjoyment I had in a big blockbuster, which is not, I'm not the demographic for anyway. So
I don't think so. I think we are the demographic for it.
True.
I'm assuming.
Well, I'm sure Netflix thinks everyone's the demographic.
Well, yeah, but I'm assuming there's a decent amount of gore in it. Like it's rated R. I'm sure language and gore is in there. Like
that's true.
With our age and the fact that like it's a Western, so it's going to be more towards the male audience and probably younger male audience that can handle the gore, maybe language that's used in it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely think we're right there in the audience, the target audience.
Yeah, and I more than anything, believe me, I can get behind a dumb action film. I'm not saying that this film couldn't have deeper elements to it, but watch it for yourself and you can decide. If I could save you some time, though, that's why we're going to go ahead and give The Harder They Fall a 34.
Ooh, 34. I was thinking around the 50s. Okay.
Really? I mean,
I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah,
but after
there's
you
stuff to
talking
love.
about it, for some reason, I was thinking 50s. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Idris
stuff to
Elba
love.
can only carry it so far.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, I can't tell you how much. I would challenge anyone to listen to almost to the soundtrack separately and guess where that's going to be in the film and be proven wrong 100% of the time. But I like I introduced for it, folks. I am a little soft-handed with this or 50-50 because it's Netflix, you know what I mean? There is a very low barrier to entry, and I think that's maybe something important to note as well. So
Sure. Again, just as a big Western fan, I would be rolling my eyes.
Yeah, especially
Okay,
if you weren't a huge fan of Buster Scruggs, this is even farther in the stylized hyper fantasy, kind of Western fantasy. So.
The funny thing is it's still a Western, so I still feel like I need to watch this.
Right.
All right, so moving on here, we're going to go with Wes Anderson, big name coming out with The French Dispatch.
We got a lot of big names. Oh, boy. Okay, so we covered... what did we cover? Fantastic Mr. Fox recently.
Yep. Fairly
recently. So I was super pumped to see this film. This is a anthology or short segment format. If you're not familiar with that term, basically think like little vignettes, little short films. Primarily, this film breaks down into 2 very short segments and 3 primary segments that make up the film. To my knowledge, Wes has not directed any sort of anthology. I haven't seen all of his films. I've seen a good amount of his work, but what's great about this is that all of these little dives into stories, topics, kind of pseudo-historical segments, all of it is really bleeding Wes Anderson style. And I think if you're familiar at all with any of these films, it is absolutely a notable style. This is this is remarkable in the sense that it's totally recognizable. The quirkiness, the
he has
delivery,
such a style that only he does, really.
It plays into a little bit of how scenes and shots are set up, positions within the frame, how characters leave the frame, in goofy or kind of quirky ways. It's all over this film. By the nature of the anthology, by the nature of this kind of short segment format and these mini short stories, these mini stories, some are better than others, and I think it's honestly the curse of an anthology type movie. We're actually going to be covering an anthology film soon, and I think that will challenge my kind of notion of some being better than others. There's always going to be this kind of natural comparison that as you're sitting in the audience and watching these films, you go, oh, well, I kind of preferred the first one. Or I really like that last one.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a curse to the format, but...
Yeah, there is a natural comparison type thing that happens.
Exactly, exactly. But for that reason, how I'm introducing this way, folks, is I don't want to get into too much into the content of any one of these stories. One, because the runtime's not that long, and 2, to avoid any sort of spoilers or kind of expectations to say, oh, this is the good one. This is what the Daily Ratings said was the best one, or anything like that. So I'm not going to get into that at all. Instead, I want to kind of focus on it from a bird's eye. Wes's style is relentless, and totally in a good way. It's very, very entertaining. Just when you think you've seen all the tricks, especially if you've seen movies in the past, or I think what he really, I don't want to use something so bloated of a word as magnum opus or anything like that, but Hotel Budapest is really the masterwork.
Yeah.
And for me, watching that film, it was, how is he going to, all the tricks are out, and still there are more ways that he's introducing his very particular style, and it's always entertaining to watch, whether it's it
puts a smile on your face, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It boils down to the fact that the film itself is fun to look at. There is an entertainment factor in the moving images itself.
Yeah, honestly, just boiling it down like that, you're totally right.
Yeah. There's a dance to it. I think when it comes to, characters, how they're interacting with this writing style, certainly there's a very large cast across these multiple stories. I think it goes so much more than Wes having a fresh re-roll of actors and actresses to work with. I think, again, he is still further refining the toy box style. I don't know if that's maybe the perfect way to describe it, but yeah, I think that's
good enough.
That's where I have in my notes. It is toy box style, and specifically his use of miniatures as well. I think really plays into that.
I love how you're looking at a miniature, and yet it's like it's like so perfect. It like works completely.
Some shots in this, and especially for Hotel Budapest, more breathtaking than what I think would be CGI. With a massive budget.
Yeah, there's something about it that I don't know. I guess toy box. That's not a bad way to kind of describe it.
I originally had quaint, but I feel like that was kind of derogative. I don't know, or
a little bit.
condescending.
I don't know. It fits the feeling.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. He's so good at it.
We
can't even describe it. You know what I mean?
And
he envisions it. And Wes Anderson, from my understanding, is not just hands-on. It's like to a T, every minute thing. I remember I was listening to Jeff Goldblum in an interview, and he was talking about when he was doing Grand Budapest. He had changed something, like he had changed a the to a but, or something like that. And after the scene, Wes was apparently like, "Did you change something, Jeff?" And then Jeff was like, "Oh yeah, I thought I thought it." However he would say, and he was just like, "Oh, I thought it would work." And then Wes Anderson was just like, "Yeah, let's just try it the other way, something that small."
Yeah.
I mean, so he envisions these things, and he knows exactly what he wants, which is incredible because, again, we don't even know exactly how to put words into it, and he's dreaming it up and making it happen.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And I think that shows definitely a craftsmanship, certainly care into his product, and at such a high level. I mean, it is. I can't not come out of this movie very positive towards it because there is so much care, and I would challenge any audience member to look at that movie, look at any of his movies, and say, yeah, he was just doing that for the paycheck. This is for his art. This is for his product. Yeah. Performance-wise, a very large cast. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into a critique of story arcs or the characters, but I think there are some standouts. Adrian Brody, phenomenal. Frances McDormand, obviously fantastic. I'm a big fan of her. Gonna have a review on something of which I think is probably her best performance in the coming weeks, so very excited to talk about. And Benicio del Toro, really, really fantastic in the film.
Oh, good.
And when you see them on screen, the only type of prepping that I want is just to recognize, I mean, these are really some great performances from all of them then. So.
And Lea Seydoux is in it. Mm-hmm. Is she in it?
She's
Wes
in
Anderson?
Benicio del Toro's segment, and the first of the the three.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, or you can't really say big because they're all short stories, but the primary.
And
three.
isn't Timmy Boy in it too?
Timmy Boy is in it.
Yes. All right. Well, he's getting on the podcast 3 times this week. It's a big week for him.
He's going to have to pay us royalties soon. But I think... because I don't want it to be all gush, because honestly, I'm not coming out of this film saying it's a masterpiece. So don't get me wrong. I definitely want to give some criticism here. And I think the issue with what I have with this film is the same in most of his films, is that the story is so entertaining to watch. The concepts are being introduced, the characters are being introduced, and then it just always runs out of gas a little bit. The follow through is always a little bit weak. And if I had to kind of give a blanket criticism to Wes's stories that he takes on, is that they run out of gas, or maybe it's that's the effect on the audience, or at least for me, when the beginning is such a huge highlight and then the ending doesn't really have that follow through. I think that is emphasized here because, very simply, we're touching on this in the short story formats, and almost identically in each of the short stories, you get to a point and you're like, okay, all right, I guess it's ending now, and okay, and it's done.
It peters out, kind of.
Exactly. And maybe, that plays into the type of stories he wants to tell. He doesn't want to tell a bombastic conclusion, a Hollywood ending or something like that. Maybe that's very intentional to the type of art he's trying to convey, that it's a dip into this little magical world, and then we're done,
but if it's so almost, I don't know if episodic is the word, but to get that over and over and over where things kind of fizzle out, that's when it's got, I don't want to say it's a drag. I don't know if that's a little bit dramatic, but it kind of is. And I'm just looking, like, you would think it'd be a little bit it's only an hour and 47 minutes.
Right.
So you would just think it would be naturally a little bit more snappier and just keep you up. You know what I mean?
But I mean, I think especially for our main three segments, I can almost point to a T that I wasn't exactly like looking at my watch in the film, but it was a moment of just, all right, well, where's this going? And now it's over. Okay. So I think, prior to seeing this, I thought him tackling mini stories was a perfect fit for that reason in concept, because I thought it would have been a solution for if he's going to run out of gas in a traditional story arc or something like that. Smaller films, maybe that's a strategic way to address that type of problem. Still, in each of these stories, it has its own little stumble. I think for me, more of this director style. I always want more of Wes Anderson. I think I want him to get funding because no one's making it like him, and I think that's a gem to have in our film landscape.
Yeah, no, of course, absolutely.
I think more importantly, critically for me, it does not break the mold, and it definitely does not reach the heights of what I think is pretty commonly referred as his masterpiece now as Grand Budapest. So that definitely is still the king. I was excited to maybe see him break that mold a little bit more, but alas, definitely not a bad time whatsoever. And if you love Wes Anderson, for folks at home, absolutely something you can watch because it is a direct injection. You are mainlining Wes Anderson style across 5 little short films then. So
very cool.
With that said, we will go ahead and give The French Dispatch a 73.
All right, 73. A very good score. And I think a lot of people listening are going to give it a watch. There's so much respect there for the guy.
Absolutely. It is a very solid watch, more than anything. I mean, the cast being so huge, you're going to find something to love across the board.
I'm going to go on our site then and check out, just go through the ratings that we give him and see how consistent he is. I'm very interested because he's such a consistent guy.
Yes.
I mean, very different films, of course, but consistency in that feel and just like quality. I'd be interested to kind of see where he lands up.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right. That's awesome. 73. Let's keep it going here. We have The Last Night in Soho, directed by Edgar Wright.
Okay. All right. One after another. I mean, big films, big directors, and a lot of excitement from me, because these are directors that I like to follow. Obviously, the fuel of having the podcast is an extra incentive there. More than anything, excited to talk about these films in a major way. Last Night in Soho is very much a stylized teen horror film with heart that seriously raises it above the typical body swap type of plot that you would get. Very recently, there was a film with Vince Vaughn called Freaky.
Still want to see it.
I know. I heard pretty good things, but
a big Vince Vaughn guy, as you know, big Vince Vaughn guy.
You gotta let the folks at home know. This
big
is
fan.
The first Vince Vaughn reference. But I think it's important to note that I came at this film with a little bit of unfair expectations. We touched on the Sparks Brothers, Edgar Wright's documentary, and I was very positive on it. I'm very positive on this film. Understand, for me as an audience member, Baby Driver was like one of my favorite films of all time. And
it's in the 90s, folks.
Yeah.
It's in the 90s on the daily ratings, which, as we know, there's like 10 only. Yeah. So,
I think coming into this, I really had to keep my expectations in check, because I knew I really wasn't going to get the magic mix that I saw in Baby Driver. I knew I was probably going to like it.
You got some butterflies going into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You've been on an Edgar Wright high, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, he really is one of my favorite directors. And again, almost very similarly to the Wes Anderson commentary that we just did. It is so entertaining to watch the motion picture on screen, Yeah,
you've commented on that before.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to note with this is that in my description of this being a teen horror movie, it is very much more a teen flick. Yes, Baby Driver, you could probably associate the same, being a kind of a teen heist thriller in some ways, or at least, as the main characters. This one, even much more of a teen flick. And almost talk about my theater experience. experience with this. I saw this in theaters, and there was a rambunctious group of like 17 middle school to high schoolers. They were talking the whole time. They were
You turning the grumpy guy? Did you turn
no.
the grumpy guy on him?
And that's exactly why I want to bring it up. It was actually added to the enjoyment of the film and made me understand this is the demographic for this film. When there was something scary, I wasn't even slightly scared, but hearing these kids actually jump out of their seats, it really
didn't annoy the hell out of you.
It didn't annoy the hell out of me. I was really enjoying. I mean, obviously, I wasn't like joining in with them. You know, they're children, but it really kind of had a youthful quality to it that I enjoyed a lot. And
very similar to when you're watching a comedy and you have a theater all laughing at the same thing.
Participation in a good way.
It bolsters the movie ever so much more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And I think that was important for me because in the moment, especially my early thoughts in this film, it feels very much like a teen setup because that is what it is. And just seeing that allowed me to kind of understand the film, hopefully what Edgar was truly going for. Hopefully that's actually not a misread as well.
No, yeah, of course.
But I think much more, it's important to note, from Baby Driver, we're moving much more into the teen side of this, and not necessarily for a bad way. Just important to note that you're not getting a, slow burn drama horror or something
right, no,
like
of course.
that.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's an important distinction to make.
Yeah. Edgar is playing with less.
By the way, it's still rated R. It's not like
that is true.
It's not for tweens or anything.
How'd
like
they
that.
sneak in there? How'd they get? I gotta check ID.
Check an ID. Yeah.
You're ruining my movie. No. Edgar is definitely playing with less editing tricks in his tool belt this time. Much like Baby Driver, there's a dedication to one specific styling. For Baby Driver, that was obviously music cuts, which why that film jives so well with me, because I love musical editing or musical kind of synchronization in the edit. For this, there is almost a single focus in Edgar Wright's editing tricks that he always taps into on a dancing of characters in place of each other in the frame. We have Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I unfortunately forget the other female actress. The single focus here is having these characters dance in place of each other in the frame. We have Anya Taylor-Joy playing a character set back in the 60s, 70s, old school Soho, and then Thomasin McKenzie as our present day. The two female leads, they really are equal with each other, because not only do they have equal screen time to share, they are actually sharing the same screens in cool visual editing tricks. A character will pass, one of the two will pass a mirror, and you will see the other on the other side of the mirror.
Very cool.
During a dance sequence, there's a very prominent dance sequence in, maybe a quarter into this film. And constantly, the characters are switching out real time behind the camera with the dance. It's very entertaining to watch.
That's cool.
And I think
Edgar Wright has such good flow in a film. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think just in the same way that probably Baby Driver was an exploration of musical cuts as a singular trick or singular kind of gimmick, not in a bad way, but when it comes to this, the gimmick is switching these characters out as much as possible.
That's pretty cool. That's cool though.
Yeah. And for that reason, I mean, this film, like a lot of Edgar Wright films, rewards the keen eye. It rewards an audience member paying attention to little cues, little themes, because there's going to be constantly cuts in the edit that are going to play into that theming and creating this style. Seriously, a British film. I mean, this is about as British as Hot Fuzz, and obviously focus on a much cooler setting of Soho. I bring this up because I think for that reason, the coolness of that setting, maybe some callbacks that I couldn't appreciate as a domestic U.S. watcher. I think there's maybe some enjoyment if Soho is a kind of not a historical setting, but a part of the city or a style, especially the 60s and 70s vibe of that. If that's something that you dig at home for folks at home, that is going to add to a lot of enjoyment here. I also bring it up as kind of a half pace because for me, I have no doubt I probably missed some deep cuts, or if something was shown in a particular way, maybe a specific club from back in the day, I just didn't have an appreciation for it. So something to note that I think could be there could be a lot there for audience members to love. The musical styling, the setting, not that I couldn't appreciate it, but I definitely wasn't, saying, oh, look at that,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great because, like, someone who is more in the know or something like that, or overseas, it's like it makes it that much even better.
Sure. But where this kind of plays into kind of a not a criticism, but definitely not a huge highlight after. I would not separate that type of highlight from Easter eggs in a movie, which, I mean, you look at some previous reviews on the podcast, definitely has been a negative as well. So kind of something to note, but nothing that I think is going to distract too much from the film, because bottom line, if the film is trying to go for a very cool style, it achieves that through its setting and its music and a lot of care through that.
Okay.
So I intentionally don't want to talk about the story too much. I've said that now 2 times with French Dispatch, but
but it's sometimes, I mean, we do our best.
Absolutely.
To be spoiler free.
We got to be spoiler free.
And sometimes it's just, that means sometimes you're just not going to talk that much about
exactly. And I think,
but
I think it's important to note because this is a movie that I was surprised at. There are some, I don't even want to say twists, because there are multiple moments that I was like, wow. I mean, I didn't expect that. Folks, I watch a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of movies. So wasn't I shocked when I was surprised by this film? Not once, but multiple times. I think for that reason,
That's refreshing. It's refreshing, yeah.
Exactly. And just know that our 2 female leads are a delight to watch on screen, especially Anna Taylor-Joy. She's phenomenal on screen, very, very cool, and just such a presence. Definitely gets a positive mark from me. And like I said a moment ago, this film rewards the keen eye. It rewards the smart viewer, like most of Edgar Wright's films. So I don't want to give elements away, but if you decide to watch this film, pay attention and know that there's some surprises coming, but pay attention to the moments that are what is given the focus on in film. The film itself is going to reward that type of viewing style. And like I said, I mean, I watch a lot of movies. I can pick them apart. I was damn surprised that this film, actually threw me some twists.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear.
It's wonderful. So, apologies for maybe being a little less meat on the bones than I would talk about something, but really bottom line, I love this film. Go ahead and watch it. It's one of the most stylized horror films in a long time, and give one of the best directors working right now some love. We're going to go ahead and give The Last Night in Soho a 78.
All right, 78.
Not the heights of Baby Driver, but still a great time.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm going to check it out for sure.
Absolutely.
Especially at a 78, man, that's a really good score.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's keep the big blockbusters keep on rolling here. Kind of the Mac Daddy, I think, personally.
I want to get me a glass of water.
We're going to go, folks, with Dune. A lot riding on this one in kind of multiple ways. Directed by Denis Villeneuve. No,
Denis Villeneuve.
Villeneuve.
Oh, wow.
We've learned, folks.
Here we go.
6 different ways to pronounce it, but we think we nailed on the proper one.
No, we're going to call him Denny. I love Denny, too, and the fact that I, through the press circuit, have found out I've probably been pronouncing his name wrong the entire time.
I think a lot of people have those. That's all right.
I know. It makes me feel like a big dummy, but but Denny getting behind the camera for Dune, I mean, the film that is cursed to make people say, oh, you talking about Doom? Is that the video game with The Rock?
That's true.
In the end product here, we get a moody Shakespearean dialogue with a slow burn sci-fi. And ladies and gentlemen, it has never been so breathtaking to watch. I think Denny has really done a phenomenal job to bring it all home, where quite literally, others have failed. We have Dune trying to be adapted by Jodorowsky, who did Holy Mountain.
Of course. Oh,
yeah.
gosh, yeah.
Which maybe we'll revisit Holy Mountain. That'll be
maybe.
yeah. And then, of course, the David Lynch adaptation in the 80s, which I don't think... I mean, maybe that's something that we can revisit at some point, but not a big fan.
You.
Yeah, not a big fan of that film.
No one is a big fan.
Yeah.
David Lynch is not a big fan.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Absolutely. I love this film, but not for all the reasons you think or that you may associate with my love of sci-fi. I have no attachment to Dune as an intellectual property. I have not read the books. As a nerd on the internet, I have dived into a little bit to understand the timeline and spice and the empires and have kind of a cursory nerd knowledge of Dune.
Sure, absolutely. Which is good. That's good to do.
Yeah. Really, what I was coming into this for is a true love of Denis and his films. I kid you not, folks. I feel fully confident in saying that Denis is the best director of the 2010s. Prisoners, I think, is one of the greatest thrillers you can watch at all time. His rise into sci-fi with Arrival, with Blade Runner as a sequel, you can watch this film and see the building blocks of his career, of his filmography, and the ramp up into the stylings and how this monstrous story is portrayed. And I think especially with the ability to watch this on maybe an HBO Max or the ease of watching this, I think I'm coming out of this very, very positive with this Dune adaptation. I think it's important to note, and definitely not a spoiler because it's may not be in the marketing materials, but right in the title of this is a part 1.
Yeah.
A little bit of a shell shock, I think, for some, because we were expecting, much like the David Lynch version of the film, that it's going to be all in one package. That is absolutely not the case here. So I think it is something to note, because if I was to criticize this film, I'm going to call it working title Deathly Hollow syndrome, where with the last Harry Potter, we split that into 2, and it kind of felt like the second half of the movie is going to be all climax and no build. I foresee that could be a thing here, but I don't know. I have not seen the second part. The second part's not, hasn't been made yet. So I think the jury's out on that, but important to note that...
And if I had to take a guess, I would say it's not going to be anything like that. Well, and not only that, you look at TV as well. TV is constantly breaking up almost their last season into 2 small seasons.
Very
and try
true.
to just, string it out for another year, just for audience sakes and ratings and viewership and everything like that. I don't think we get that here. I think it's like, no, this is such a large story. I think they needed to give it the runway, and it's proper due.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And maybe that's I think you actually bring up a good point, because look at how much television has or television screenwriting has evolved since Harry Potter as a film series. So maybe you have a serious point there, Tom, because there probably is going to be a lot more care into the having that second film stand on its own.
I hope so. And we can only hope that Denis is a part of that. And
imagine if it's taken away. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have another Star Wars, basically.
I can only hope that he's going to be directing it. I mean, you can only hope he's going to be directing it. And if not, very highly involved in some way.
Absolutely. And it that really ties back to my point here. No real attachment to Dune as a property. Some knowledge, but my love of this film is on the filmmaking side alone, and I think definitely deserves your attention, because bottom line, this is Denis' show, and his DNA is all over this in a very good way. I think the first major win here is in this film that it's super dense. The exposition is impossibly dense to Dune, and it's handled in an interesting way. There's some natural learning for Paul, our main character. That's Timothy's character in the movie. There is a little bit of exposition in negotiations and dealings and ritual and tradition. It's such a smart delivery of that exposition to the audience that it it's not exactly making it sexy or fun, but it is, I think, engaging and certainly conveys the stakes and the seriousness behind this film. I think in moments where you see maybe a drawn-out tradition or ritual in this film, especially with some of the negotiation between these political powers in this sci-fi setting, the stakes are communicated non-verbally and verbally. Non-verbally in the seriousness that these characters are abiding to, and then verbally in a tasteful way as well. We're not dealing with exposition dumps. This is not anime writing or anything like that.
Sure.
It's done very well.
There's emotion behind the characters.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely.
That's like letting you know how, I don't know, there's a seriousness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think bottom line, though, when it comes to a lot of this exposition, the sugar that makes the medicine go down, let's say you really don't care about anything around Dune itself, are breathtaking visuals. I think the visuals are a huge plus. Let's talk about the CGI. I think the design and the scale is probably my favorite part about this. I'm someone that usually enjoys all sci-fi, whether that's a used future in a Star Wars style, cyberpunk from like a Blade Runner style, or, maybe even like a utopian Star Trek. The stylings of science fiction are often a character in themselves in that movie. It helps you kind of understand at just a moment's glance what type of world these characters live in. And very similarly, I think a strong highlight of this film is, again, the CGI, not just because it's shiny, because it tells a story of the world itself.
Yeah, and it's a character in and of itself a bit. It plays a massive role.
Absolutely.
And does he use bigatures or miniatures as well? Is it all CGI?
I don't know. I would think so, because sometimes the stone and the particular kind of brutalism of the ships, it looks very good. We're at a point that sci-fi kind of has good CGI pretty much no matter what.
Yeah, but I do want to say part of it was almost timeless and almost like the old Star Wars a little bit, where it did seem like they were using some actual modeling going on too, which added just, I don't know, a coolness to it. There's just a style behind it, which is great.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, I'm going to wait to see. I'm going to leave the verdict out on whether or not this film franchise is a success with part 2, or if there's even a part 3. Who knows? We don't really know the scope just yet, but
which I love the secrecy behind it.
It is nice. It's refreshing.
Yes.
I think Denny and team, though, they're pioneering a new look. Like I referenced, used sci-fi, cyberpunk, utopian sci-fi. These are stylings and subgenres within sci-fi. We may not have an exact word for the subgenre yet, but it's told in his architecture of the film. It's told in the minimalism and the very characterizing, brutalistic ship design. I think we are seeing possibly the startings of a new sci-fi subgenre, at least in the visual look.
Sure, you want to feel like there's others. So would you say that, as far as visually, there might be peppering of this style throughout, the past decades, but this hits home on like what? This hits it harder?
It's a follow-through. It's a commitment.
Okay.
There's no backing out. I'll give you a perfect... In Denny's own work, the Blade Runner sequel, when you get to the second half, they go to Vegas in that, and the architecture is a little wild. It's not the neon signs of cyberpunk that we're used to.
Okay.
It's something different. I think that this movie is a follow-through of some of those design cues, very much so as well. Arrival, that ship design, so new, alien, so out there. It's a little bit H.R. Giger. It's definitely is going to be taking influences from, everything's on the shoulders of giants, especially design work-wise. But I think this movie is a commitment and a follow-through in a way that I really think that we could see a lot of trend setting.
I was going to just to say, so this is a trendsetter.
Exactly.
Now, you would say you would characterize this as an epic, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Space epic?
Definitely space epic, space opera. I think that's self-described even in the books a little bit. The books themselves, I definitely don't quote me, but I think the story kind of takes place in full effect over tens of thousands of years. This is a large scale. So intimidating to approach that way. Again, kudos to trying to unpack this very dense story, and I think it's done very well. Just to pepper here, I definitely don't want to just gush for the movie. I think my main gripe is the dialogue in this film.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it works for the most part. I think when the moody Shakespearean characters are on screen together, it works well. I think it highlights how almost Star Wars Episode 1-ish, Phantom Menace-y, Lucas-style dialogue it is at sometimes.
Okay. Wow, interesting. All right.
I think it's highlighted actually in Jason Momoa's character. Jason Momoa plays a pretty much like kind of like a normal dude, a soldier, and has life in it. And when that character, I believe it's Duncan Idaho, which is like a top tier name. Screenwriters, take note of Duncan Idaho. I think it's emphasized that Paul and Duncan have a relationship that is normal. It's very brotherly. It's high energy. They're happy to see each other. And I think it's highlighted in that clearly there are normal people in this world. They're not all these high, kind of up their own ass,
sure.
High society. I think maybe it creates an interesting dynamic that we are dealing with such a higher caliber version of this society and the ruling houses in this universe that they're maybe a little bit alien to us in the dialogue. I think for that reason, I will say it works most of the times. For sometimes, though, I don't think it works. I think the emotion is ripped from it.
What doesn't work? The fact that you have normal, like you want it almost like more normal talking? Like more,
I think
what's the main gripe?
It creates a hard time for me to care about the characters. And I think if this is going to be a part one, that's really it's not even connect to, because obviously I'm not the leader of a galactic empire.
Sure, but that love between Timothy's character and
Jason Momoa's,
right? You like seeing that, so you wanted more of that. You're
yes.
saying you would have liked more of that.
I would have liked to see, wow, these characters are very prim and proper when they have to be, but if anything, there is a strive for real relationships, for real connections, and that they're forced into this because of the rituals, because of the traditions in their world.
Okay, interesting.
I think too much is put on that, and I will take it with a grain of salt ultimately, because that is a byproduct of the seriousness that this script has.
Yeah, and what you're saying is you would like the characters more humanized, and are they really humans?
Right, exactly.
Are any of them really humans, even though they look like humans, talk like humans in the film?
Sure,
you know what
this
I mean?
is a massive time jump. Yeah,
what
right.
are relationships in these worlds and in the time frames? But that's an interesting thing. Of you were kind of looking for a little bit more normal, like it was almost being shoved down your throat a little bit, like these special beings or something like that. You would,
yeah.
You're looking for more normalcy in the characters once in a while, just to bring it back down to earth, so to speak.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
And believe me, I don't think it's the most nuanced thought. Again, the best way I could describe it in a nutshell is it gave me Phantom Menace vibes in how the dialogue was delivered. And if anything, again, highlighted by the few scenes that Timothy and Jason Momoa are on screen together, because they act normal, and we see humanity in that.
Right,
so
right.
I will maybe take a half step back for folks at home. Again, I cannot stress enough, I have not read these books. If maybe there are some lines that I would have a problem with in more of a one-on-one discussion or anything like that, and I would hear that was a line in the book or stripped directly from it, I don't have that appreciation for it. But again, I think the best thing I can do is create kind of a navigation for the vast amount of audience members that do not know the source material.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And I mean that. I mean, Dune is big, but I don't think we're talking about the heights of a J.R. Tolkien for Lord of the Rings. I don't think we're talking... what would be another source material? Well, we'll stick with that example, but, I don't think there's going to be even above 20% population of watching this film that has read the books, if I had to take a ballpark.
Agreed. So. I do think it's large. But no, I do agree, because I think it's on a lot of school reading lists. I know I read it, and it was because
in
of
school.
It was a school
Wow.
reading list.
That's
whether it was
awesome.
like the summer book or something I
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
read or something like that. But Dune is very popular, but it's true how many people stick out with it. So I read the first one. I didn't go deeper into the series. I know my brother definitely has read a lot of the Dune material. But I think it's got a pretty big following as far as books. Maybe not as much as Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
But it's relatively big. But you're right.
And
For the most
certainly gonna
people
grow.
watching, I mean, for the millions and millions out there watching, most have not read the source material.
Yeah. And maybe something that grows, and maybe the appreciation of this film grows along with it. But again, that was my temperature on it. So I think bottom line here, a feather in Denny's cap as the king of modern sci-fi. I am excited to see the scope of this series. I am excited to see how many movies he gets out of this. But most importantly, for the here and now, I think, especially with part one for Dune, this is must-see material, and more importantly, must-see science fiction. It has been mentioned plenty of times in this podcast that I have a predisposition for science fiction. I hope with this rating I've kept some of that in check, but I really do think visuals alone, you can give two shits about the story. It is dynamite to watch on screen and so breathtaking for that reason. We're going to go ahead and give Dune an 83.
All right, 83.
Did we have a natural climb? Oh, no. Call Me By Your Name was in the 60s. I thought we had a full ramp up.
Yes.
Close,
we
but
did not.
but
Yeah,
not right
the harder
there.
they fall fell pretty hard.
Yeah.
That's
That's a good joke, Tom.
Back to 83 on Dune.
Yes.
That's great. I was trying to guess. I mean, I knew you saw it in theaters and everything like that. So
I've seen this film 5 times.
Oh,
Yes.
damn. Okay.
Well, it's no secret I'm a huge fan of HBO Max.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, I think I did see it as well. I did see it in theaters. I think it's. I would push for people to go see theaters.
100%.
And if they can go see it in IMAX or a Dolby Cinema for the sound. Unfortunately, I didn't see it right away. Another movie came in and kicked it out on our local theaters for the Dolby Atmos and everything like that.
Yep.
But I would definitely push for that first. Unless you have a great cinema experience at home, push for the big theater, and again, the sound. Immerse yourself in that world is what I would push for.
Pretty much everything I said about the CGI plays into the sound design with Hans Zimmer as well. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
There's so much care and intention behind it.
Yeah, that's a good one. It mentions Hans Zimmer for sure. I was trying to guess maybe like 80. I actually had it like 84, 85
Really?
is what I thought.
Yeah.
I could just feel it. Well deserving of that 83.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think my expectations are in check, especially for the sequel. I'm excited, of course, to see where it goes, but I'm not going to give it much higher because I do kind of want to see what is done with what is being set up and the massive amount of setup in this film. So
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome, Vin. Do we have anything else to add? Are we gonna roll credits
this
here?
was a doozy of an episode, so I think I'm
big
good
week.
to go.
All right, folks. Well, Vin, we appreciate you stopping by, as always. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week. And, folks, we're just going to run it by one more time here. So we have Call Me By Your Name with 68%, The Harder They Fall with a 34%, The French Dispatch with a 73%, Last Night in Soho with 78%, and finally, we have Dune with an 83%. We thank you so much, folks, for hanging out with us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com, where you can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from us. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.